You're listening to the Anxious Scholar Podcast, a podcast for anxious scholars. If you're a high school student who can't wait to go to university, but also is kind of overwhelmed with lots of unanswered questions like me, then you've definitely come to the right place. On this podcast, I sit down with EGM alumni while they share valuable advice from this exciting journey of theirs that we have yet to take. I really hope you'll enjoy this episode and learn lots of useful information about the college application process, unis, and higher education in general. Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast. My name is Victoria and I'm here today with my guest Alexandra. Alexandra graduated from EGM in 2022 and is now doing the Sciences Po Bachelor Program in Reims. The program offers campuses in Dijon, Le Havre, Menton, Nancy, Paris, and Poitiers. And today we're here in this beautiful 17th century campus in Reims. And in this episode, Alexandra will be able to tell us all about her experience from her application process to her impression of the school. So thank you so much, Alexandra, for coming on this podcast and agreeing to do this interview. It's really good to have you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Could you start by saying a few words about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so my name is Alexandra. Like you said, I was at EJM. I graduated last year in 2022. I did all of my schooling at EJM, so I arrived at Suffren in 2008. I did the OIB bac. My specialties were AGGSP, maths, and I did SVT in première that I dropped as well. And I did Chinese and German. And I had two older brothers who were at EJM as well, who graduated a while ago.
Thank you for this introduction. Could you also introduce the program that you're doing in Sciences Po, which was created in 1999 and is becoming more and more popular to this day, and maybe what you're studying, the 6 main disciplines, and if you get to choose what you study?
Yeah, so Sciences Po's Bachelor Program is a 3-year-long bachelor, 2 of which happen in France. The first 2 years happen in France on whatever campus you're on, that have geographic specializations. So in Reims, there is the Europe and North America program and the Europe Africa program, and I'm in the Europe North America program. And then my 3rd year will be abroad. And so in the first year, like you said, we study kind of these core disciplines of social sciences. So first semester has been history, economics, and constitutional law. And now we're starting into sociology and political science. And so generally we study all of these broad social sciences to get a foundation, and then in the 2nd year we pick what we actually want to study, and we pick a major, of which there are 3. We get to pick either economics and society, which is like sociology as well, or something more tangible, that's politics and government, or political humanities. So that's more law and more theoretical, so yeah.
Okay, do you have an idea of what you want to choose?
I will probably end up picking political humanities. I think that corresponds to me the best.
Okay.
But then there are also minors you can pick, which is also a good idea, because you can then supplement, if you want to study sociology or international relations while you're doing more theoretical things in political humanities, you can. So I think that I'll make a combination that'll be a little bit more diverse. Yeah.
We'll talk about this later, but for your 3rd year, like you said, you can go to this university and do an exchange year.
Yeah.
So can you go anywhere or just North America?
You can technically go anywhere, although you're right, in the North America program, so we study North America. Often we have a humanities course, for example, that's about race and inequality in the United States, which is really interesting. And a lot of our seminars are about the U.S., or at least ties between Europe and the U.S., for example. We're encouraged to go to the U.S., and I think that it's a logical continuation, but I find that a lot of people choose to actually go anywhere. You're allowed to apply to any of the, I think it's about 200 partner universities in the world, and you can apply to any of them. You make a top 6 choice of universities, and it can be, I know a lot of people in 2nd year who are going to, or who are applying at least, to South America, for example, or even to Australia, or to Asia even. So not everyone has to go to North America, but I think a lot of people do, especially since an aspect is that you're paying Sciences Po prices for the year of your exchange, and so a lot of people do want to go to the U.S. since they feel like, you know, it's a good opportunity to be paying that price to go to an American university.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if they're offering just that, but I've read a lot of people go to Columbia, Berkeley University, and like you said, University of Hong Kong, National University of Singapore. So there's a wide variety of choices. Do you know which one you would like to go to?
I'll either go to the U.S. or to Asia, I think also China, because since I studied Chinese at EJM and I want to continue it. Even though they don't offer Chinese here in Reims, but I can do it in my third year if I go to like a Chinese-speaking country. So I'm not sure yet.
That would be a great opportunity, to use our language. And when you were applying, exactly, why did you choose to follow North American studies in Reims and not another campus, for example?
Well, so you applied to 2 campuses, and my first choice was Reims in Europe, North America. And then my second choice was Le Havre with the Chinese specialization, or Asian specialization, but for me it was for the Chinese. And I picked here as my first choice because the program just seemed really interesting. I think that especially after doing like the American OIB, you're introduced to so many, you study American history, you study American literature, and I knew that I definitely wanted an Anglophone program, which is also a characteristic of this program. That's not necessarily present on other campuses. And I think felt like it was just most interesting to me, also because I'm Franco-American, and so I wanted, to continue
this intercultural,
the U.S. and France.
School.
Yeah, absolutely.
And during your application process, when you were considering different universities, did you consider schools in other countries or other majors?
Yeah, so I applied to 3 countries. I applied to the U.S., to the U.K., and to France. My top choice was in the UK, and I was more serious about the US than the UK actually, and I applied to Sciences Po kind of on a whim. I was planning on doing baccalaureate, but just because like the school makes you, and I was hesitating about Sciences Po, but I was kind of very tired of all the applications by the end of it, but Monsieur Kie actually encouraged me and told me to apply anyways, and I'm really happy I did, because once I got it, it was kind of like a no-brainer compared to my other choices where I was like, yeah, I definitely want to go to Sciences Po. So yeah.
And how was it like, applying to the UK and US at the same time? I mean, it's everybody talks about it's really hard because the US has a lot of time, writing a lot of essays. So how did that go for you? It wasn't problematic? It didn't like discourage you?
It was definitely very time consuming. I remember in Terminade when we were all doing this, we would like spend our lunches in the studio still doing like in the 65, like just like working still on our essays. But I think if you go through the process and you take time to prepare, like I remember the Common App, you do before, the Common App essay you do before the summer, and if you work on it over the summer, then that saves you a lot of time. And even my personal statement, I had started at it pretty early. And it's a balance, but I think it's definitely worth it because, they're very interesting, very different choices, both in the US and the UK, but I wouldn't limit yourself just out of, fear that it'll be too much work.
Except for, the fact that it was time consuming, it wasn't a problem that, it's 2 different systems. It wasn't that different.
It is quite different, honestly, even in terms of like the essays that you're asked to write. I think it actually takes some time to kind of master both to understand what each is requiring of you. But again, like the counselors at EJM explained a lot of that. And so, in the US, the essays are a lot more person-based, based on your personality, trying to understand who you are, not academic-based at all, really. Trying to see kind of your personality and your values. And why and how you would be a good fit to their school most of the time, versus in the UK, your personal statement that you submit to like your 5 choices on UCAS is much more academic and is much more related to the course that you want to study, and what kind of reading you've done that has made you interested in that, and how you plan on continuing with those studies. But it's much more academic, so it's very different systems in what they're looking for in the application process, but I think once you figure it out, it's okay.
What would you say are 2 or 3 differences, like main, differences between the 2 systems?
Well, in the UK, you have to apply to 5 choices on UCAS, and they have to be relatively similar. You have to pick your one course, basically, and then you write one personal statement that goes out to all of 5 universities. So you can't really be like, I want to study, you know, political science at this university and then like film at this university, because then your personal statement isn't going to make much sense. So it needs to be quite consistent. Versus in the US, sometimes you can, you know, you can apply undeclared, and like your course, like what you're actually going to study is like kind of an afterthought or comes later in your studies. You don't have to like specialize or pick your major until like your second year, or it depends on the university. So it's much more, you know, based on
the university.
And like what you want to bring to them outside of academics, just like as a person, as a part of their community. So I think different emphasis.
And you really have to do more research about the university specifically, because you're writing an essay separate for each one.
Absolutely, in the supplemental essays,
And when you were applying, you know, you said to different universities, was it more or less for the same, you know, discipline, like political sciences, or was it different majors?
Mine, it was always very consistently political science or international relations.
And you, since when did you know you wanted to study this?
I started getting interested in politics in like troisième, and then I did the Youth and Politics Club. I did like different things that, you know, really confirmed that I wanted to continue, that I wanted to study politics. And then once I did SGSB as one of my specialties, I was like, for sure, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Confirmed.
Very confirmed, And so honestly, by the time I was in seconde, I kind of knew that I wanted to do international relations or political science. So,
and that's great, because it also allowed you to, you know, to know quickly what SPE you wanted to do. So could you, you know, tell us about the ones you took and maybe the one you dropped in term?
Yeah, absolutely. So my choice was kind of not diverse. Complicated, but diverse, because I chose SGSB as a first choice. I knew definitely I would do that.
No brainer.
Yeah, no brainer. And then math, because in the US, actually, often considering that I was, you know, considering the US, sometimes they like to still have a background in math to have like a full looking education, like a whole and so I kept math as a specialty as well. And then for my last choice, I kind of went on it by elimination, because I wasn't the biggest fan of HLP, and I really was not into economics, and I didn't enjoy SOS when we did it in seconde. And so I was kind of looking at my choices, and I like saw an SVT I found interesting in seconde, and I was like, and you know, my grades weren't terrible in it, and I was like, okay, then I'll just, you know, continue with that, kind of like as a strategic choice. And it was really hard. It was very hard in première. But then...
Because they were different, or just because the program's hard?
The program in SVT is very hard, I think. And at least with the teacher that I had, it was very hard. And also, a lot of people are interested in it because, you know, they want to do médecine. So, you know, they're very driven for it. Okay. And I think that I had more that motivation and, like, that passion in HGSB that came much easier to me and that I really enjoyed in première and terminale. And so then eventually I dropped SVT, which I knew I would. And honestly, it was really interesting for a year. Like, I feel like I learned a lot, but I knew definitely that, you know, it was more HGSB that was for me than SVT. And then math was you know, interesting and a good pick for
a lot of people taking it. Like you said, to have, you know, to not close any doors, because you never know. With math, you can have more chances after, more choices, also possibilities. And it's interesting what you're saying about, you know, a very diverse kind of you know, dossier like SVT and SGSP and math, because I don't know what I want to study for sure, but I'm interested in like psychology and whatever that derives, you know, neuroscience or psycholinguistics. And I would want to take, you know, HLP, math, and SVT. Yeah. And we've had a workshop not long ago, you know, workshops with the college counselors, and I've heard that, you know, if you don't take SVT with physics chimie, then it's not necessarily, like, useful. And I was going to ask you your opinion, like, what do you think? Because I think, you know, HLP for, you know, with language and linguistics, it can be very complementary with SVT, because SVT is like a practical study and like HLP is more like a theoretical, exactly. So, and nobody advised you against it, or, you know, Madame Boulet wasn't, or, you know, your head weren't saying that it's not useful or it's not gonna...
No, not at all. In fact, I think it was with Madame Nimaga where we talked about it, and we said that, like, it would work. And I think that's the whole beauty of having this specialties
exactly,
now.
that's what I was, because
Yeah.
you know, students, I'm not saying it's wrong, because if you want to do medicine, that's the right choice, who are taking, you know, physics, chimie, SVT, math, and that's what S would be.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great that I get to like choose like completely different things that I wouldn't be able to do with the old bac.
And I think you're right that it'll bring very like complementary and very different views of like the same thing if you're studying like neuroscience for like speech, and at the same time in HLP there is a whole part that's like I know about like le pouvoir de la parole, like
exactly.
so that would be a great
and for the grand oral,
great combo,
an interesting grand oral,
exactly, definitely. I think you'd be one of few to have that mix, but I think it would be a good idea.
What was the topic for your grand oral?
My grand oral, so I did one that was purely HGSP, that was about patrimoine, so about heritage, and about basically the new anti-racist movements in the US and whether or not they were questioning colonial heritage. So basically with like Black Lives Matter and statue removals, and so I did that in HGSP, and then I had a mixed math in HGSP 1 about the environment, because I talked about the fires in California, where I'm from, and how the exponential number of fires, like I made it a function and I studied the function. And then I basically showed like, well, if we don't do anything soon, you know, the number of fires will become so exponential that, you know, it's not going to be good, basically. And then I brought it into like, so what kind of policies should we be doing for the environment? Yeah,
it's really smart to do this. You know, it's the beauty of like combining two completely different like disciplines.
Yeah, it was hard. I think a lot of people struggled to find math as GSP like mixed.
I can imagine. But that sounds.
I also made it personal, and that's the one that I ended up like doing. I think that's one that they picked, and it went really well. So,
And what about the questions? Was it not too complicated? Is it more like technical questions about your cours, or just, you know, they're trying to see how you talk or how you answer like more general knowledge questions?
I think it's a bit of both. I'm not sure about general knowledge, but they definitely ask questions about the content of like your specialty in terminale. I remember I had quite a few questions on math. She was just kind of flipping through like a textbook and being like, okay, tell me about, you know, like this fonction, whatever. And honestly, it was okay. It was not an issue. And then I think there's a last part where they ask about, you know, your professional goals and where you're going to university and whatnot. And that is definitely a very, you know, confidence-based. It's just seeing if you're able to talk, if you're able to express yourself well. And I think that that's really not an issue for most of the time at EJM, especially since we do so many presentations all the time, or like we have a lot of oral training, especially in Terminal with like the English bac and the history bac, at least the OIB one that I did. And so it's just an oral exercise, definitely in that aspect. So I think it depends, but mine was very balanced between, you know, we're testing your content, like your knowledge, but also we just want to see how you talk.
Okay, and so that's the oral part of the bac. So that's like at the end in terminale. Could you explain like how it's organized? Because even though it changed with the BFE, which basically they added the APs, it's still pretty similar in the sense that it's separated into 2 years, première et terminale. So if you could like go over, you know, like the most important exams and the spécialités, like how do these exams go?
So in première you have le bac de français, which is basically the only bac that you do in première. I believe originally we were supposed to have like an exam for the third specialty that we're dropping, but I know that we definitely didn't. We just had like our final moyenne.
It's going to be a contrôle continu. I can even say, remember, it's coefficient 16 for the 2 that you keep and 8 for the 1 that you drop. Right,
okay. And so so it's contrôle continu, so it's your final moyenne. So you only have an exam in French. So in French you have an oral and a written. So the written is 4 hours, and then your oral, it goes over the text that you studied and whatnot. And then in terminale you have basically everything else. So those, your 2 specialties, which are your coefficient 16, English and history, which are coefficient 15, philosophy, which is coefficient 8, I believe, grand oral, which is 10. Trying to think if there's anything else. No, I'm pretty sure that's it. Just your specialties, English, history, and then the grand oral and philosophie.
Do you have any tips for students, you know, who are going through that, or who will go through this whole bac process, because it might seem a bit stressful, especially when you're applying to universities. So how did that work for you? It wasn't too overwhelming?
It was okay. It was definitely a lot of work. I think that it just kind of comes up at you, and it's naturally overwhelming, and you just kind of have to figure out how to deal with it. I think you really have to figure out like your way of studying and what works for you, especially once the épreuves start like accumulating quite quickly, because you do like your specialties, and then in like, if I remember, beginning of June you have like English and history written, and then at like the end of the week you have oral, like both of them like day like following the next 2 days. And then philo comes really quickly after that, like another week, and so you're like realizing like, oh, I should have been studying for this for months. Like it feels like you should have been building it for a long time. So I feel like studying and creating a plan long term that covers all of the épreuves, because I remember like by the end we were doing our contoral like very last minute, because like we had just had all these other épreuves to worry about. So I feel like finding your way of studying and then making a plan that's long term for all of the épreuves that makes sure that you have enough time to study for all of them, I think that's most important.
Okay. And I think we do have this, like we're lucky to do the compo, because that sounds, what you're explaining, it sounds like compo, because it's all like, well, right now it's even better. It's like on 2 weeks. So you have the time of the weekend to prepare for the second part. But it's still, you're like, oh, I should have done this. But then you're doing it the night before, and you're not thinking about the ones that are coming.
That are after,
Exactly. But the thing is, we're on this together, and it's good that, we have our teachers, we're doing this, we're going to school for this, for preparing. So it's, overall, we just have to plan out and be organized. And so that's the bac, but again, like in parallel, you're applying to universities, and I was wondering if we could talk about the Sciences Po application, because it's a university in France, but it's still a very Anglo-Saxon system. So there's from what I understood, there's a 4-step process. So they look into your bac results, in like your transcript, your contrôle continu. There's an interview, and also essays. So maybe if we could start with the grades, is there like a minimum grade or minimum moyenne that you have to get on the bac to get into Sciences Po?
No, not technically, or not explicitly, but it's true that your application is given a grade out of 80, basically. First, that's after the interview, but first to even you have to be admissible for the interview. And so once you send in your application on Parcoursup, so I think that's like beginning of March, April, I can't quite remember. Once you send it in, you're given 3 different grades out of 20. So one on your bac results so far, your moyenne basically. A second one on your parcours académique. So that's kind of like, your teacher's comments, your placement, your rank in your class, different things like that. And then a third one on your essays that you send in. And then if you have a high enough grade out of 60, you're chosen to do the interview. And then the interview, they give you another grade out of 20. And then if you have a high enough grade out of 80, basically with the interview grade, then you're accepted, you're made an offer. But so you don't technically need a specific moyenne, but the higher it is, the more chances you have of reaching the ultimate score that you need to be accepted.
Of course. And there isn't like an official minimum you have to get out of 80 to get into Sciences Po?
It depends. It changes every year.
Okay.
Last you were allowed to ask what grade you got and what minimum grade it was. So the minimum grade, I believe, was 69 last year out of 80 to be made an offer.
Okay.
So,
And for the contrôle continu, like I was wondering, do they look at your predicted grades? Because you said March, April. You didn't do all the bac épreuves.
No, not at all.
So they look at your predicted grades.
I don't think they do, actually. I think that they look at your bulletin, especially for like première and terminale.
And for the, like you said, they look at your bac results. Like there isn't an official minimum you have to get, but again, like for this, like I was wondering, like I'm not really sure. That's what it's called, predicted grades.
I would say predicted grades. In my recollection, we had predicted grades for the US and for the UK, which was basically when they sent, well, we think that she's going to get this grade in this subject for the bac, but on the bac, like on the actual exam. And I don't recall anything like that being sent to Sciences Po, because everything is done on Parcoursup, so it's kind of different. And I believe that they just see your bulletin and what exams you've already passed, so your transcript from première, which is like your French, and the third specialty that you dropped, and your language and whatever it is. That's
Okay, and I've read that they look at the 3 like years before your university, so seconde, première, terminale.
Yes.
Do you think it's like really important if, for example, you have better grades in première than in seconde, but they see that you've you've gotten better and over the years, like your grades, your skills and everything. So is that a problem if the three years aren't like the top, like the?
I wouldn't say so. I think my moyenne has gone up from like seconde to première and then première to terminale, and I think that progression is generally a good thing and is well looked upon. I know that they ask for your bulletin from seconde, première, terminale that you have to send on Parcoursup, and I would say that grades in seconde are somewhat important, like relatively important, less compared to première and terminale, but it's also, I think it's a good idea if you can show that progression. I think that's beneficial.
Okay. And you've talked about the parcours scolaire. Do they look at does this include like extracurricular activities that you did in high school?
That's a separate part on Parcoursup where it's in the essays. It's like a centre d'intérêt activité, and they ask you about, basically they give you, I can't remember how many characters to talk about your extracurriculars, and that's when you talk about them. And there's also one of the Sciences Po essays, more particularly, because the centre d'intérêt activité is for all of Parcoursup, and then Sciences Po has a specific essay that's kind of like how have your extracurriculars helped you towards Sciences Po, and how will you continue them at Sciences Po? And so that also gives you a chance to be like, well, I did this club and I see that you have a similar club, so I'll continue it there. So there's also a chance to talk about it there.
So you think that's important for Sciences Po? It's like for example, if you're applying to a prépa, it's not necessarily the most important thing they consider. It's mostly your grades. But is this the case for like Sciences Po? Like they really value those things? I
would say that they value it. I definitely think it's an aspect. I think that Sciences Po in there is a little bit more American in their application process, and is looking more for like your personality as well than just your grades, because they see all your grades and your parcours académique and everything, but so your écrit is also a chance to show that you have a personality, that you are engaged, that you have these values, and I think that can really come through in your choice of extracurriculars, and so I think that's something that they're interested in.
And America, I know, really values like volunteering work or like extracurricular things, like maybe participating in Olympiads outside of school. Do you think that's the case also for Sciences Po? And maybe did you do those things?
I didn't do Olympiads, but I did quite a few extracurriculars. I was head of Youth and Politics Club. I was in History Club and volunteering to help the Collège Club as well. So doing a lot with that. I was a peer leader. I was helping the care committee and doing lots of stuff with that. I was playing guitar. I was tutoring, babysitting, different things like that. So I think that extracurriculars are definitely encouraged, no matter what it is. If it's volunteering, then that can definitely be used, especially since Sciences Po also, cares a lot about that. Or if it's Olympiads, and there are ways to talk about it. I talked about the history competition that we had done with History Club, the championship, and so, there are different, whatever you've done, I think it's important to show it off, and there are ways to do that, no matter what it is.
And including in your essay.
Yeah, in the essays. Yeah.
So what kind of, is there there's several essays that you can write? So what kind of questions were they? You could write whatever you wanted to write about, or was it specific?
They had prompts. So there were, I think, 4 essays. There was one essay that was basically why the social sciences, like what makes you interested in the social sciences. There was an essay that was basically why Sciences Po. Which campuses do you want and why? And here the choice of campus is very important, because you have to argue, for the geographic specialization. Like I had to say, why I wanted to do North America or why I wanted to do Asia. But it can't really, it's harder if it's a little bit more random. One essay that is about the extracurriculars, kind of being like, how would you continue your life at Sciences Po? Like, using what you've done so far, how would you continue that at Sciences Po? And then a last one, which is more creative, and this is what they call l'essai. And so they give you, I think, 5 possible prompts. My prompt, the one that I did, was choisissez une œuvre musicale ou cinématographique du XXIe siècle qui, selon vous, mérite de traverser les âges, ou de traverser les époques. And so you had to pick, an œuvre and talk about it, and that was the prompt that I did. But this year there are also really interesting prompts that are more creative, that are like, pick someone who was either born or died in like 1923, and say like 100 years ago, and if you were to write a movie about them, what would it be? Or if you were to write like their synopsis, what would it be? Or pick an event of the 21st century that has meant a lot to you, or something that's like choisissez une cause qui selon vous mérite la désobéissance civile, or something. So then that essay is more creative and allows for more, to show your values or your political engagement in certain things. So the essays, they vary. They're the academic ones, and then they're the more creative ones.
There's more freedom to express, show yourself as a person. Out of curiosity, which movie or music piece did you choose?
I picked a musical. I picked Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
But I was the same with other musicals as well. And I talked about another musical. I talked about the musical Hadestown in my interview. I didn't talk about Hamilton, but I wrote my essay about Hamilton and why I think it deserves to traverser les époques. And I think it worked well also with, saying that I was interested in history and that, I did the history club and everything. It was quite cohesive. Yeah.
And do you have any tips for students who are going to have to write, essays, not even just for Sciences Po, but, like you've had to write essays for America, for the UK. Maybe should they buy like an essay anthology to look at essay examples? Or should they be like more humble, or on the opposite, really like not hesitate to mention their achievements?
I think it depends on the essay. I think I can't think of many where it's like you should be arrogantly, boasting your achievements. Yeah. I think that there are ways to talk about your achievements, or ways to show it off. But I think humility is always important. That's universities. I think you have to remember that it's people that are reading these, and they're going to be put off if they find you arrogant. They don't find that very attractive. And otherwise, I think for the essays in general, I think that creativity is important, honestly. It depends on the system, because like I said, in the UK, it's more rigorous, it's more, academic. But in the US, they definitely value creativity. And in the Sciences Po essays, in one of them, I would say they value creativity. But so I think the real importance is understanding the prompt and the system that you're in, because I wouldn't write an essay for the US the way I would write an essay for the UK or for Sciences Po. And so I think understanding each prompt and kind of what they're looking for is really important. I don't know about essay writing, like buying like books. There are definitely great resources online though. Even like this is also a new good resource, but for the US, for example, there's a website called the Essay Guide, and it's this guy whose name is Ethan Sawyer, and he's like excellent. He's very helpful, and he makes lots of videos and very specific like guides, how do you write a supplemental essay to this school and different things. So that's very helpful. I recommend. And you can find similar things there's I think called UniRise for the UK, where they also give you help for your personal statement. There are definitely lots of resources online.
Okay, well, thank you for the reference. I know he has a podcast. Well, he makes videos and podcasts for sure.
Oh, and also for Sciences Po, SOS Sciences Po is excellent. I highly recommend as well. I basically use that for like my entire application.
Perfect. Thank you for mentioning that too. And for the US, is there like one prompt for each university or several? And I think you can choose. So if you can if you remember some of them to give an idea to students how like it's different in the UK and in the US and Sciences Po.
Yeah. So in the US, you have your Common App application, which is basically you write one essay that is sent to all of the universities. And this is there are a few topics and they change I'm not sure if they change every year actually, but it's like, I remember the one that I had done was like, pick a moment or something that changed your view of the world or that changed your opinion. but there's also, you know, things about identity is often a theme that comes back, or they often ask about, you can often write about identity, you can often write about your community, or, you know, something that changed you, a conversation that changed you. These are prompts that come back a lot. And then each university also has like supplemental essays often. And so these are specific to the university. Most of them are, you know, obligatory, but sometimes they're optional, it depends. And either you get to pick some of the, which prompt you do. Like I remember there were universities where I picked a prompt, and there were others where it was just kind of baseline. Common supplemental questions are, why this university? Which is basically your opportunity to show your knowledge and your understanding of the university, and like how you would fit in as a member of their community. And so that's really important. Other things are often like, there are some things that always come back, like, something that changed you, or, you know, tell us about a conversation you had that was really hard. Different things that are basically, they're just trying to give you opportunities to like show who you are as a person. Or something that's really common as well is like, you know, if you had to have a conversation, if you had to have a dinner with anyone in history, who would it be? Those types of questions that come up quite often. And so those are your opportunities also to be more creative. So,
So I can imagine they're looking at your creativity, at your ideas, you know, like you said, your values. Of course, it's important, you know, to write well and, you know, no mistakes. But do they really like look into like the way you write? In terms of like syntax and just...
I think not as much syntax. It's often I think it's less like less strict on that, but I think it's often they like having a little bit of like magic in their essays. What I mean is like they often want like show don't tell. So they want, you know, like an essay where instead of saying I'm really generous or like I care a lot about my family, they want an essay that's gonna reveal that through a story that you tell or through an anecdote, but they don't want you to explicitly say those things, you know. So it's less looking at the syntax and it's more looking at just, you know, kind of the story that you're telling them and that you're taking them on. Okay, perfect. So it's a different skill.
And it doesn't have to be too academic. Like if the really like you said, show not tell, if the way your ideas is creative, then it's good. Yeah. And just to close the parentheses on the the American applications and the essays, because I think that's really interesting too. And to go back to Sciences Po's application, I was wondering, like, it's definitely like different for each university, but is it like does it take so much time to actually like differentiate them? I understand when you're talking about the community of one university, you have to like write one specific, but can it be like plus ou moins, like more or less similar?
It depends. There are some essay prompts where you can definitely reuse material that you've already done. Often you find, like, if you're looking at one university and you're like, oh, that essay sounds kind of familiar. I think I wrote an essay with like a similar prompt for this university. There you can always take things back again. But for example, the why us essays, those are really important. It's really important that they're unique. I remember one trick, one hack that you should be doing is like, you should, if you could replace the name of the university that you're writing about with any other university, it's wrong. And the sentence still makes sense, it's wrong. Okay. It should be something way more unique, way more specific, that they know that you like went out of your way to do research specifically on them, to their university. Okay. Yeah.
And so about the interviews, the fourth part of the Sciences Po application. So is there a way to like prepare for it? You know, is there like mock interviews that you can do?
There is. SOS Sciences Po is really great for that. I remember I signed up for a mock interview with 2 current Sciences Po students, actually from France, that are now second years. And they also provide a lot of resources. For example, reading the news is really important for your Sciences Po interview, like before, leading up to it and everything. And they provide, for example, lots of practice questions on what's been happening in the news. So like they have this huge document, for example, that has like every region, and then on the US they'll have like a bunch of questions about l'actualité, and they'll be like, like what happened with this, or can you talk to me a little bit about this? So you can prepare kind of different things that have been in the news that have been recent, like current affairs, that you should be reading about and that you should be aware of. And so that's very important. They also have lots of just practice questions. I remember I used a book that was preparing for Sciences Po, and it had like lots of tips for the orals. But
do you remember the name of the book?
It was something very, very explicit, like
Just
like comment rentrer à Sciences Po, or yeah, la procédure d'admission Sciences Po Paris.
I'll look it up then.
Something like that.
Okay.
I can send you the official title. But besides from that, honestly, SOS Sciences Po I recommend so highly, especially since they also give binôme. Like right now, I'm a binôme for 2 or 3 terminal students who are applying. And so like I'm reading their essays, we're talking about the prompts, you know, like what would you write about, and then eventually I'll definitely sign up to do practice interviews for other students. And in fact, I know that EJM students often do it for other EJM students, like other people who are at EJM, who are at EJM who are here now,
awesome.
did it with their second years. And so there are definitely practice interviews that you can be doing through resources like SOS Sciences Po. Yeah.
Okay, so you weren't too worried because you were prepared and it was what you expected.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect.
They're very clear about the structure of the interview and what you should prepare, what you should be expecting. And they have YouTube videos about it as well. So yeah.
And it went well for you.
Yeah, my interview went quite well. In fact, my practice interview with SOS Sciences Po with the second years didn't go as well. Really? Okay. Sorry, went quite badly. And then it was a few days, it was like 2 days before the real interview, and I was like, oh crap, like if it's not going to be good. But then the actual interview went very well, and I was very happy, so yeah.
So you really wanted to prepare, for everything?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, and so now you've been in Sciences Po for a year now, a bit less. So what's, could you talk maybe about like the student life, in such a historic city, in the City of Kings? What's the community like, how do you like it now? What's your impression?
Well, Sciences Po is very nice. It's tight-knit, but because, Reims is quite a small town, but it's very cute, and it does create a sense of community for sure. Like when you walk around in town and you see someone from Sciences Po, you're like, you're definitely at Sciences Po like me. You definitely know, because total on campus we're about 1,600 with exchange students and EURAM and EURA for first year and second year. And so you're always meeting new people, you're always discovering new people that you didn't know like were on campus with you, but it still feels quite like a community. There's also always something happening on campus, like in terms of student life. We have so many SO and so many like bureaux, and they're always doing something. Like you could never possibly be like bored, because you can literally just look up on the calendar and you'll see that like there are 4 conferences happening with 2 guest speakers and a stand for this and that, and they're selling cookies for this cause and whatever. So there's always something happening on campus, and that's quite nice to really have that sense of student life. But so it also gets competitive, because Sciences Po students in general are quite competitive, and I find that it comes out more in terms of like which ASSO, which club you're in, like what events you're doing, rather than like even in academics. So yeah.
But it's great that you guys can like get your mind off of things and do things separate of your studies. And what about like the city? Reims, it's such a beautiful city. Is it not too calm for you? And I know it's different for people. Some people prefer like big cities. Some prefer like more calmer. What is it like for you?
Well, like I said, it's cute. It's definitely cute. Sometimes it feels a little small, a little bit claustrophobic, especially like I said, since there are a lot of Sciences Po students compared to, especially in like this area of Reims, it's quite concentrated. So like you can't go grocery shopping without seeing people from Sciences Po. And so sometimes that's nice, but sometimes, I also miss, growing up in Paris. I also miss Paris sometimes, and just being able to feel like anonymous in a big city. That's quite nice. And so it's important to go back as well. I usually go back to Paris like once every 3 weeks ish to see, my parents and go home and whatnot. And that's nice, because it's really not far. It's 45 minutes on the TGV, and those train tickets are really accessible, and so a lot of people often go home. So it's quite nice because it's close. but I wouldn't say that there's like nothing to do in Reims. There are like still, I live in the center, like Place d'Arlon, and there are like lots of things to do, lots of restaurants, lots of bars. There are places to go out. There's like movie theaters. Like there's still things to do.
Yeah.
And I think that Reims
It's an
is
important city, so
yeah,
of course.
and it's honestly, and yeah, with the champagne houses, like it's a very particular context.
Yeah.
All of our galas happen at champagne houses,
Wow.
so it's really nice there is to have that
It's amazing.
as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's it's what you make of it, but I quite like Reims.
Okay.
I think it's a fun place to do your 2 years of college.
For sure. And then you'll go to third year to
Exactly.
New York or anywhere you want.
Maybe a big city. Yeah.
Change of setting, yeah. And in your studies, like what's the atmosphere? Not the atmosphere, but like the lifestyle of like a Sciences Po student. How do you like? Is it not too? What's the work rhythm? The professors, like you said, there's a lot of clubs, so that's nice. I can imagine there's a lot of international students.
I think it's about half, at least on this campus, it's half international, half French. And so it makes for it's quite diverse. In terms of work, so we have like in first year we're divided into triplettes, which is kind of like a class, the equivalent of like an EJM class, where we're like 20 students, and often things happen in this format where it's like you have your big lecture and then you have a smaller discussion seminar where you talk about it, and where you do like you talk about the readings that you have to do, and you have the opportunity to ask more questions about the content. And so it's often in that format where it's like big lecture, smaller seminar. And that also happens for courses that you can pick that are often smaller. So like, for example, what do I have? I have like a statistics class that's like, again, I think like 20 something people. And so it ranges, you have your big lectures in the amphitheater where we're like all 400 of us, but then you also have smaller classes. And they also give you opportunities to have different sorts of classes. So like you don't pick a lot of the classes in first year at least, but in second year you have your major and you get to pick, and you even get to pick like right now we're doing exploratory seminar, that's what they call it, and it's basically they gave us like 5 different options, and I'm doing a really interesting one on gender, peace, and security. And so there were different choices between that or history or more like environment-based ones, so you get to pick some of those classes. And you also get the chance to do like an artistic workshop. That's what we're doing right now in second semester, where you have a bunch of different options to do like an art workshop, but it can be, I'm doing a theater one, but a lot of my friends are doing film. There's also like writing, literature, cooking, juggling, dancing.
Super diverse,
Yeah, there are lots of different options. One of my friends is doing like African percussions.
Wow.
Yeah, or like different music ones. So there are lots of different options, and you can definitely, you get some choice in terms of like a creative class like that as well. So I'd say that the course options are quite, wide. You get your chances to pick certain things, even though first year is more set in stone than second year. Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds like a really fun, student life. A lot of different opportunities and choices to find new things and try.
Yeah.
And I know, like, it's only your first year right now, but I was wondering if we could, like, briefly talk about, the future, like, paths you can take after such a degree like yours in Sciences Po. So maybe, like, are you considering, like, a master's? If yes, like, where would you want to do it? And maybe after, I know it's nobody knows, never, but, like, what kind of work you would want to do after?
Right now, I am quite interested in a career in diplomacy, but I've actually, through my first year courses, I've gotten more interested in constitutional law as well, so I'm considering that. It's kind of in the back of my mind, but I think I'll definitely pursue a master after Sciences Po. It'll probably be in the United States, because I'm not sure which country I want to work in, but I feel like this is always like the EJM question of like where you're gonna work. And I'm not sure.
Anywhere you can work anywhere.
Basically,
with our languages and
Exactly, and so I'm not sure if I want to work, in the U.S. or in France, or at a more somewhere else even. And so I feel like I should have a degree that's not just from France, but also I should get a degree from the U.S. In case I do want to work there. And so I think I'll pursue a master's there. I don't know where exactly. And after that, I honestly have no idea. It depends kind of if I want to, there are certain concours in France or exams that you can pass in the US to, go into diplomacy. But if I want to take more of a constitutional law path, then maybe I'll go for another, I'll get a law degree, something like that. I'm not quite sure, but yeah.
Yeah, we have the time, and I was wondering, out of curiosity, like if you, for example, do your double diploma in, like, for example, Columbia, let's say, and then for your master's, you'll want to, like, is it going to help you that you already went to Columbia for a year and you have a double diploma to get to the master's, or not necessarily?
I'm not sure about Columbia.
Or any, well, I've read Berkeley, for example. About,
No, I know. It's basically something that's for certain is that if you get into Sciences Po's bachelor program, you have a spot reserved for you in master's, which is actually quite attractive.
In Sciences Po, you mean?
Yeah, at Sciences Po's master's. Yeah. So no matter what, if you do the dual degree, which are 2 years, or if you just do regular Sciences Po, you have a spot in, like, any master's that you want. So that's quite attractive for people who want to stay in France. And I think that, I don't see why it wouldn't necessarily help. If you're doing, like, a dual degree like Sciences Po Columbia, I feel like it probably wouldn't, harm your application that you've already done a bachelor's, because you come out of Sciences Po Columbia or, like, Sciences Po Berkeley with a diploma from Sciences Po and a diploma from Columbia or from Berkeley or from Hong Kong or wherever you're applying. Yeah.
It's a good, I think it's an interesting question to think about that, because you get maybe more things to talk about in your essay when you're applying.
Yeah.
And last but not least, a little piece of advice from your experience, that if you had to say something to listeners who want to apply to Sciences Po like you, to the bachelor program, what would you say?
I would say to do it, first of all, because I think sometimes we need a little push of motivation. I know that I did when I was telling Monsieur K, I want to apply to Sciences Po, but I'm kind of lazy and I'm kind of done writing essays for colleges. I was really like, done, yeah, I was really done. And he told me that, you write more in a 4-hour OIB exam or like compo than you do for, than these 4 essays and the little bricoles on Parcoursup. So like you might as well write it. It won't take you that long. And so, it takes a little bit of motivation, but I did it and I'm really happy I did. I would say to use all the resources you can, like SOS Sciences Po, like a potential book, like past EJM students, because they can really help you in, understanding what's required of you and if Sciences Po is what you want. I would say to, go for it and to put all the chances on your side.
Well, thank you very much, Alexandra, for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience with us. It was really good to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in on this episode of the Anxious Scholar podcast. See you in 2 weeks for the next interview, and don't miss out on any additional information on our Instagram @TheAnxiousScholar.